This is the Education Gadfly Show.
Welcome to the Education Gadfly Show. I'm Stephanie Disler, producer of the show. On today's episode, Amber Northern and David Griffith sit down with John White, former Louisiana Superintendent of Education and CEO of Great Minds, to discuss the reforms he led and their impact on Louisiana's NAEP gains. Then, on the Research Minute, Amber examines a study on the expansion of transitional kindergarten and its effect on early learning access. All this and more on the Education Gadfly Show, starting now.
Hello, this is your host, David Griffith of the Thomas B. Fordham Institute, here at the Education Gadfly Show and online at fordhaminstitute.org. And now please join me in welcoming this week's special guest, John White, former Louisiana Superintendent of Education and now serving as the CEO of Great Minds PBC. John, welcome to the show.
Thank you, David. Good to see you, and good to see you, Amber, as always.
Yes, thank you.
Yes, and I should say also welcoming my co-host, Amber Northern, filling in for me, filling in for Mike Petrilli. Amber, nice to see you.
Thank you. Yep, Mike's got some flu bug today, so I get to be co-host. Yay.
Yes, we'll see how it goes.
Yes.
And of course, is also my immediate supervisor, so let's hope I do a good job. All right, guys.
All good.
We are here basically to talk about Louisiana's fantastic NAEP results. Well, they're not fantastic. They're okay. They're fantastic relative to the general doom and gloom. We're hoping John can give us some insight on that. So let's get down to it on Ed Reform Update. All right, John, thank you so much for joining us, and really looking forward to getting your insight on what you think is going on in the country and what you think is going right in Louisiana in particular. So let's start there. As many listeners probably know, if you look at the most recent NAEP results, they were generally terrible. They were particularly terrible for kids at the bottom end of the achievement spectrum, where we see really no evidence of recovery, generally speaking. But as always, there were a few exceptions. There was a very, very thin silver lining. And one of the few exceptions was Louisiana, where the results were somewhat encouraging, particularly in fourth grade reading, where I think it was basically the only state in the country to see a significant increase in achievement since 2019. So why don't we start there? Can you just give us, in your own words, what you think that improvement is attributable to?
Well, I think you have to see Louisiana probably among a handful of other states that seem to be, whether they're making adequate gains or not, outperforming the rest of the pack. And I think the Urban Institute's model that uses socioeconomic factors and uses a regression to isolate achievement, I think is really the most effective at kind of establishing a year over year or administration over administration pattern of what states are doing something, it appears, that is setting them apart. And that includes Louisiana. It also includes Mississippi, Texas, Florida, Tennessee, and some others. And I think those states, and I'd put Louisiana at the top of this list, they have a history of the following things. One, over multiple decades, and it really has been multiple decades in Louisiana, they've held a strong bar on accountability for schools. They've also included student and teacher level accountability. They have a view on curriculum and what actually should be taught in schools. They're willing to put their thumb on the scale of what should be taught. And then they have an eye towards scale. They believe that it's the state's job to assure that when the standards are promulgated, when the curriculum is set in motion, that there's support provided and that the teaching is actually being changed at scale. And I do think that that mentality, that the state actually bears some responsibility for the quality of what's happening, not just at a test score at the end of the year, but actually whether or not teaching behavior is improving, really does set Louisiana and some of the others apart from what I think you could say is most states, which really are more rulemaking bodies and resource allocators. They're really not in their mentality, in their political traditions, and in their capabilities organizationally, equipped to deal with things like the decline of academics, basic academic skill in America, the acceleration of that decline through the pandemic. They're not performance organizations in that way. They don't have a system set up to manage the education system. They are, as I said, they're more regulators at best. And that's a real difference. And I think that's why you see Louisiana and some others set aside.
Okay, so let's dig into that a little bit. It makes sense at some level, right? But it also raises all kinds of questions, at least for me. One of which is why are these states this way? Can you just tell us about Louisiana? I mean, has it always been a state where there was comfort with sort of state level leadership? Or is that a fairly recent development? What accounts for that?
Well, I mean, I think we should give credit where credit's due. I think the current superintendent and his board deserve some credit. I think some of the governors past deserve credit as well. And this really dates back to the days of Bill Clinton and Dick Riley and Jim Hunt and others. And our governor at that time was Buddy Roemer, and he deserves credit. I think Buddy really was the leader in kind of kicking off the standards movement, the accountability movement in Louisiana, and that was picked up over years. So it really was about individuals to some extent too. But I think you're right that there are factors in the Deep South that make it structurally perhaps more conducive to the state being a kind of de facto manager of a system rather than just a kind of iconic or just kind of a notable influencer, but not really the manager. And those principally are, one, county-based systems. We call them parishes, but in most states, county-based systems rather than township or municipality-based systems. Two, some degree of top-down governance, which I don't necessarily endorse as a principle, but I will say for the purpose of establishing a more interventionist education program, yes, very much that. And in our state, of course, Huey Long would be the kind of progenitor of that tradition. And then I think you have the absence, these days at least, of elected superintendents in most of the states that I'm describing, elected local superintendents for the most part, but also elected state superintendents. There are some southern states that still have elected state superintendents, Georgia, South Carolina. South Carolina, to be fair, has first of all, wonderful superintendent, but also a state that did well in the Urban Institute poll. But for the most part, you're talking about professionally appointed boards or politically appointed boards and a professionally appointed superintendent. And I do think that insulates some of the politics from the process from politics, and it makes that person's accountability kind of less oriented toward votes and more oriented toward results, which I think is a powerful animating presence. You don't get that as much in some of those North Midwestern states or Western states that still have that elected superintendent presence. But most importantly, county-based governance and a more assertive state role as a political convention, no doubt those things are factors.
Yeah, it's all sort of counterintuitive, right? Because these aren't, generally speaking, blue states, right? And so, you're essentially saying that you have to have a little bit of a top-down approach if you want to do it at the state level. I guess that makes sense. Can you say a little bit more? I mean, you're giving credit where credit is due, but I do think there's a long history here, at least in Louisiana, of sustained efforts on a few key things. Are there things that you think states are sort of better equipped to pursue? I mean, you can imagine pulling any number of levers, right?
Yeah.
That could matter. You've stressed the importance of curriculum, teacher development. I guess I'm curious to know if you think those should be universal priorities or, if they reflect sort of the circumstances in Louisiana. Just say a little bit more about the substance of what you did or what you did.
Yeah. I mean, I do want to reflect on one other thing about Louisiana and Mississippi in particular, which is it's not hard. It's hard being at the bottom. No doubt that's hard. But Louisiana and Mississippi are states that are really still reconciling with a past that is profoundly problematic in many ways. And what that does allow you to do, and Katrina, in our state really made it even doubly so, is to be very honest about the facts. And I should have said that too, that I think just the ability to cut through some of the noise and say, look, let's be real. Low-income kids in Louisiana, Black Louisianians, but also white Louisianians and kids of other backgrounds who are poor, learn at a tragically low level for a highly developed nation like the United States. And when you can just start being honest about that and say, we'll never, ever, ever get to where we want this state to be unless we change that, that's a messier thing to say in New Jersey from what it is in Louisiana. And so I do think that there is that. There is a clarion call in these places too that makes it hard to dispute and maybe makes it a little bit easier to kind of manage some of the politics. But states themselves really should be vehicles for scale. They should be the anti-parochialism. I mean, parochialism is the thing, is really the trait that holds our education system back, in my view. More than unions or more than not spending enough or spending too much or, all the things that we like to throw back and forth. In my view, parochialism is the thing that holds us back. We have put our system in the hands of tens and tens of thousands of smaller political entities, essentially. That's a very, very hard way of managing a system that needs to change on the order of what the NAEP reveals, the change is needed. And so states should be the scalers. They shouldn't be hiring the teachers. They shouldn't be hiring the principals. They certainly shouldn't be hiring local superintendents. School boards are good at that, and that is their local responsibility with public trust. But states should be doing some of the basic things, like, as I said, establishing the governing model. How many individual school divisions do you want? How do you distribute resources fairly? And I'm very proud to say in Louisiana, we have one of the tightest distributions between the wealthiest and the poorest districts on a per capita basis in the state. That's a function of good state policymaking. We have a strong definition and have had a long history of taking a long-term view on what academic success is. What is an A-rated school in Louisiana? And I credit my successor. We were a part of that, but he's been a part of that in picking that up and continuing to try to hold a high bar. We've pivoted in more recent years, over the last 15 years, to saying it's not enough, though, just to say, like NCLB did, here's the target. We actually do need to say on some level, we're the state. The law and the Constitution give us the power, our Constitution give us the power to say what a quality education is, and curriculum is a part of that. A high quality curriculum is a non-negotiable dimension of having an outstanding education. I would never accept otherwise for my child, and I haven't heard anybody who would. And so the state at least saying, we've given a review, and this is what we'll put our credibility behind, in this product we will not. But then also assuring that there's a marketplace of ways that teachers can be steeped in mastering those curricula, and the teachers are not wasting their time on hours and hours and hours of extraneous professional learning and other in-service type work, and actually are focused on using that curriculum as a tool to master their craft, and that there's some accountability for them and some accountability for kids. And that system, it sounds so obvious, but just done well and communicated well year after year from one administration to the next, it's going to get results. The problem is most states don't have that system.
All right, I want to get Amber in here. Amber, what are your thoughts?
Oh my gosh, I have several, but first I just want to say amen on the curriculum role at the state agency. Honestly, John, what you guys did in Louisiana just opened the door for so many other states to have a similar policy on vetting curriculum, whether it's a tier thing or whether it's like, here's a recommendation list and you can, pull off of this. Or if you don't pull all off of it, you're not going to be, eligible to receive X, Y, and Z. So you've got the incentives there. But I actually think that what you all did in Louisiana was just hugely helpful. I mean, you guys know I'm on the Virginia State Board, and there would have been no way that we as a state could have come out with, here's our list of curriculum that you have to, adopt in K-3, had there not been a Louisiana and a handful of other states who had done it before, but not to the degree that you guys had done it. So I do think that is huge because it is an important lever. And the other thing I just wanted to say was just the importance of the state superintendent being appointed. I do think that really resonated with me as you were talking, and having, at least in Virginia, we're all rowing in the same direction with the appointees having been appointed by the governor. And it can be very ineffective and dysfunctional if you don't have everybody rowing in the same direction. And the other thing that you said that perked my ears, and I just wanted you to talk about a little bit, was student accountability. Like, what does that, or what did it look like in Louisiana? What does it look like now? Because I feel like that's the piece that a lot of states are missing, because we've let go of end of course exams or high school graduation exams and so forth.
Yeah, well, I mean, we've kept high school graduation exams, and I'm very proud of that.
Yeah.
There's been a lot of attempts to kind of roll that level of accountability back, but I just don't believe, Amber, that there is the system has a kind of inherent necessity to have some definition of what the end goal is. Like you can't have a successful education system if there isn't some gate that means something at the end.
Right.
And I think it's totally fair to say that different students encounter different challenges. Different students are going to take different periods of time. I mean, a lot of the complaints that have been lodged against promotion policies in particular over the years have a lot of credibility to them. But the idea that we just shouldn't have a bar of any kind of real verifiable substance, and that we should essentially accept a kind of seat time based diploma as the exclusive means to getting through high school. And this has been said 1,000 times, but it's just in too many kids' instances kicking the can down the road to a less than successful launch into adulthood, and that's not a good answer. Look, I like what my successor did in Louisiana. I mean, he worked with the legislature. They created a third grade promotion policy, not unlike Mississippi's. Mm-hmm. Like Mississippi, they looked at, or frankly, like Alabama's as well. They looked at that third grade screen as an opportunity for struggling students to really tailor interventions, and I think they're genuinely working at it. I think that's why Louisiana is one of the better instances of a real investment in tutoring, for example, because they've actually been thoughtful about how and where you need to deploy the tutoring in order to support students that are kind of identified for need. And so, look, I don't think there is a kind of a one side of the coin versus the other issue when it comes to promotion policies or high school exit policies, but I do think they're a necessary consideration. Children and families have to have some skin in the achievement game too, and teachers and administrators have to have it. But it really does need to be shared accountability.
I'm sorry. I'm just saying that there was no fight, because I feel like all that's under assault in so many places. Is it because of this, history you guys had of being at the bottom, frankly, that allows you to sort of make the case for keeping a high school exit exam or some kind of student accountability piece?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think this is a competitive culture. People understand the idea of merit in Louisiana and winning. And, if you need any evidence of that, just go to Baton Rouge on a Saturday night. So in October. So, I think the idea that we would walk away from any kind of exit standard has felt like a discussion that just doesn't have as much traction here, perhaps, as elsewhere. No. By the way, that's not to say that the exit tests in Louisiana are perfect. It's not to say that tests are a perfect measure of anything, and it's not to say the policy here is perfect, but it is to say the system needs to say, we stand for something. And providing that diploma does mean something, and I think that unfortunately the country has maybe given one away a little bit when it comes to the tools that we have in our tool belt. It all flows downhill in K-12 from higher education, And to the extent that we are sending kids to higher education that we have said, we've validated, we have some hard validation that they're ready, that's meaningful. To not be able to say that, I think, is kind of tying a hand behind our back.
Right.
John, we're almost out of time, but before you go, I think I should just ask you, what is your advice for state leaders in the current moment? What is the thing that you think they could or should be doing that we're not doing? Because it does not seem that what we've been doing for the last 5 years is working. So what needs to change?
Yeah, well, I think the answer to the big NAEP question is we don't know what's going on.
Right.
And I really wish that more people would be saying that. It's not that states are doing a worse job than they were doing before. All of a sudden they got bad. All of a sudden school district got bad at educating kids. They used to be good at it. I mean, it's just not true. What has happened is the world has confronted schools with new challenges. Some of that was happening before the pandemic. Some of it was happening as a result of the pandemic. Some of it is technology related. Some of it is inevitably outside of school related, and some of it must be within school related. There was a time in this country when national and state leaders would convene across the private sector and the public sector to actually try to study these issues in a rigorous way. And I think the best thing that could happen, if the federal government won't do it, then the states and their partners like CCSSO should be doing this, which is, and Fordham, which is to say, let's figure out what the research says actually could be plausibly underneath this. And I think in a way, the most important step we can take is to stop pretending like we know all the answers and actually try to get under the hood as leaders of what in the world is going on here. That being said, the most important thing that states can do in their capacities in the absence of that kind of inquiry is to have a plan and have a long-term plan and have a plan that says, this is what what kids need to be able to do, in the simplest terms. And these are the steps that need to happen in every single classroom, tens of thousands of classrooms in this state. And it's a high quality curriculum. It's a teacher that's prepared to use it. And it's a clear sense of accountability for family and student, teacher, as well as education system. If you have those three things and you can sustain the leadership at the local and state level year over year, working at it and not let politics get in the way, states are going to start moving in the right direction. But I don't think we have so many states that are quite have that view, that their job is to be accountable for that teaching level behavior. And it's that shift in mindset that really has to happen.
All right. Very well said. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have for today. John White, thank you so much. Now it's time for Amber's Research Minute. Amber, I would welcome you back to the show, but you've already been here.
I have, and that was kind of fun. I like to listen in on the guests. I don't get to do that very often because, little secret, I don't join until it's my time to join.
Yeah, I think some of our listeners might be in on that secret, but it was a good conversation.
Yes, it was.
I think one way or another, we have to get back to states being serious about education. It's sort of hard to imagine a total solution without that. So
that is right, and they need to just take up the reins. They're allowed to do that. So, yeah.
All right. Well, this is also usually the time when you and Mike talk about football, but Mike is sick, so we don't have to do that. So our listeners are prepared.
And it's over, by the way, David. There was a thing called Super Bowl that's already happened. So
it's never truly over, Amber. It's it's in remission. What you got for us today?
We have a new descriptive study. It's an educational researcher. It's looking at the take-up of transitional kindergarten in Michigan. I really wish Mike was here because he would be all over this. He's been kind of interested in this idea and how it impacts participation in other learning options. What is transitional kindergarten, you ask? It is a fairly new public school-based option. It's a universal program that does not require families to meet income or other needs-based requirements. California, Michigan, Iowa, and Washington apparently have versions of it, and it's growing. In Michigan, where the study is that I'm going to talk about, it is for both 4 and 5-year-olds. For the 4-year-olds, it's an alternative to pre-K or other childcare. For 5-year-olds, it provides families with another option for delaying kindergarten, which we also call redshirting. In Michigan, over 300 districts, which is about half of them, offered voluntary, I'm going to call it TK, but I've got TK and pre-K, but they're offering voluntary TK, transitional kindergarten, in year 21-22. That's the year that we're looking at here in the study. It's descriptive. And they had approximately 10,000 children in their state take part in TK in 21-22. The state does not supply. I thought this was kind of interesting. The state is kind of mum on the purpose of it, why they have it, what it's supposed to do, but they do describe it in their literature as the first year of a 2-year kindergarten program. The number of kids in TK grew substantially once the state moved the kindergarten birthday cutoff from December to September. So essentially, those TK programs filled the gap year for children with fall birthdays that was created by shifting from December to September. So now TK funding in Michigan is available for all kids who turn 5 by that birthday cutoff of September 1, or they also say within 3 months afterwards. So if you were a child born September 2nd to December 1st, you also could, participate in TK. So all that, the other important part of this is how is it different from pre-K? And that was another sort of important part of the study. These were the key differences, in my opinion. The programs are all in public schools, so they are co-located with kindergarten programs. They are full day, and the TK teachers are compensated like the rest of K-12 teachers. So they are literally the highest paid early learning workforce in the state because the per pupil funding is the same for TK as it is for K-12. All right, the analysts, what do they find? Number one, larger and more advantaged districts are more likely to offer TK than smaller and less advantaged districts. Specifically, the districts offering TK serve a higher share of white students and smaller shares of Black students. Number two, overall, white, Hispanic, and other race kids are roughly twice as likely to enroll in TK than are Black and Asian children. Number three, families are more likely to use TK to redshirt boys than girls. Sorry, that was kind of funny. And kids with IEPs during their first year of school, so whether they were in TK or whether they were in grade K, they were more likely to enroll in TK. So the redshirted boys and the kids with IEPs were more likely to participate. And then they saw a little bit of difference between the preschool kids and the grade kindergarten, the 4 and 5-year-olds. So among preschool, take-up is better among the non-disadvantaged kids, like I said. But when you start looking at kindergarten age, the take-up is similar no matter the family income. And finally, they find that universal pre-K enrollment didn't decrease when the new TK program came to town. So kids who would have otherwise enrolled in pre-K, if they enrolled in TK instead, those pre-K spots were filled by younger kids. So the bottom line is the program raised the capacity of the state to serve 4-year-olds. More 4-year-olds got to go into the pre-K when some of them ended up going into the TK. And then the last thing, I'm kind of prattling on here, but I wanted to see, have there been any impact studies? And actually, they did publish before this when they published an impact study, and they actually found that attending TK in one's pre-K year improved kids' grade 3 math scores around 0.29 standard deviation. So that's another study. But there is promising research that the TK is helping the kids who are participating in it. But they end up closing and saying, you know what, the lack of access in these other districts needs attention, because we don't see the uptake in districts that we would want to see uptake. And when they actually went back and did surveys of those districts, and they heard from administrators that space and funding were key obstacles to them adopting TK programs. Did you get all that TK pre-K stuff straight, David?
Well, let's see. Let's see. It's really too bad Mike isn't here because this sounds an awful lot like his extra grade for elementary school.
It does.
And so I'm sure he'd be fascinated by this, but I'm also fascinated by it. The part where they aren't actually saying what it's for is particularly fascinating to me, right?
Yeah.
And I'm trying to figure out if that's because it actually is for something and they don't want to say what that something is, or if it's because it's for multiple things, and it's just not clear, potentially it serves multiple purposes, right? Maybe I missed it among all the numbers. Do we know roughly what percentage of the kids in TK are 4-year-olds versus 5-year-olds? Is it mostly 4-year-olds?
It is, well, remember that they have to have been born, right, by the cutoff of September 1 or within 3 months of it. So you've got it's all 5-year-olds are covered, right? And then you've got your older 4-year-olds covered.
Okay. All right. And so the bottom line is that it spans access to pre-K, though, we think, for 4-year-olds mostly.
Yes, because remember, if the 4-year-olds end up going into the TK, like at the end, I said you've got additional 4-year-olds who weren't eligible for the TK are going into the pre-K. So you are expanding, options for kids who might not otherwise be eligible to, go into TK.
All right. Let's assume that our listeners got that better than I did.
Yes.
It seems like the modal kid is maybe like a boy in a richer, whiter district who maybe isn't quite ready for that district's kindergarten. Is that accurate?
That is accurate. Yep. They definitely found that it was the more advantaged districts offering it, and the red shirting option for boys seemed to be a lot of what was going on.
Okay. And so some kids are exiting pre-K into kindergarten on schedule, and other kids are exiting into kindergarten a year behind when you would normally expect them to. Fair?
That's right. That's
Okay.
right. And,
All right.
and they're not, again, the optics are important. They're not calling it red shirting. The one thing they are saying is it's the first year of a 2-year kindergarten.
Right. Okay. Hard for me personally to oppose that. I guess I'm curious about the content, right? I mean, we also talked about whether it's different from preschool, and it sounds like maybe it's a little different from preschool. Do we think it is in terms of resources? Do we think it's more academic than most
It's
preschool?
a great question, and I didn't put it in there because I try to not go on and on and on, but they did say that the TK kids were using high quality instructional materials. So that was a specific point they made. They didn't say what it was. They didn't say how it came about that they were using them. But there is apparently some clause in there that talks about preference for a particular curriculum that the state pre-K places do not have that requirement.
Okay. All right. And I know this was outside scope, but you kind of mentioned that there were some evaluations for this, right?
Right.
Do we know what the counterfactual is there? Is it relative to just not having any preschool at all, or is it?
I wish I had looked at the study, David, but I did
That's
not.
all right. That's all right. Okay. So we think it might be high quality pre-K and or first year of kindergarten, basically.
Yes,
is what it
that's
sounds
right.
like. That's hard to object to.
Well, I mean, and right, the biggest thing to me was just that it was treated like like a K-12 in terms of how they paid teachers, in terms of the full day, in terms of, it just really did feel like another grade K first year.
Yeah. Well, that's also hard to object to.
Yes.
I know. I don't want to get too far off track with pre-K, but my current reading of the pre-K is that it's kind of good if it's good, right?
Right.
And so, I mean, I guess the other question I have then is, all right, if it is literally a 2-year kindergarten, I mean, are they going to kindergarten in the same school? Is that the idea? So that, there's some sort of alignment between.
That's right. So you've got they're co-located, and those kids would presumably be going into K, and right. So you can imagine the TK and the K teachers actually being able to coordinate and talk.
Right.
This is besides, like I said, I mean, I think I read it was over close to $15,000 per pupil spending, right, in the TK versus 8, right, in the pre-K. So you've got that as another difference.
That feels like a big deal to me. It's kind of hard to assess from a distance, right? But I have to believe that some of the challenges that we have seen with fade out have something to do with the fact that kids are going to different institutions, they're switching teachers, there's a loss of institutional memory related to the kid.
Yep.
Who knows if their records transfer, yada, yada, yada. basically, there are a lot of reasons why you can imagine kids just falling back into whatever track they were going to be on anyway, because their teachers sort of don't know what they've already done or don't.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's huge if those kids are continuing on in that same school, and they've got the socialization, all that stuff that's hard to measure too, right? That's just having already been accustomed to the school and the teachers and the procedures. So yeah, I totally agree that's a big thing. And honestly, it wasn't discussed in the study, but I'm with you that seems like that would matter a lot.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think that's probably about as deep as we can go for today.
Yes.
But,
sorry, Mike, you would have liked it.
Yeah, you would have liked it. All right. Thank you so much, Amber. This was a lot of fun. When the cats are away, the mice will play.
Yes.
That's all the time we have for this week. So until next time,
I'm Amber Northern.
I'm David Griffith with the Thomas B. Fordham Institute, signing off.
The Education Gadfly Show is a production of the Thomas B. Fordham Institute, located in Washington, D.C. For more information, visit us online at fordhaminstitute.org.